he himself, Onana, I'm told, doesn't expect to go anywhere. And I'm also told that United have been saying to clubs who've inquired about Onana, we don't think we're going to let him go.
So the goalkeeping debate rages on as Ruben Amorim finalises his preparations ahead of a trip to London. We're dissecting the future of Andre Onana and Sen Lamens while diving into the possibilities of further midfield movement. We're also looking at refereeing decisions, tactics, outgoings, and confidence at Carrington. It is all coming up, ladies and gentlemen, on the latest episode of your Theatre of Red. Happy Thursday to you, one and all, and thank you for taking the time to tune in this week. For those of you listening for the very first time, welcome along. And for those of you who can now be classed as the regular crew, your continued support is just fantastic. As you may or may not be aware, our pre-season journey was spent with me in front of the microphone by myself, digesting weekly information and answering as many of your questions as my time permitted. However, as competitive football is back amongst us, it is only fitting that I return to sharing some time with the many friends I have in and around the football club. And who better to natter with than a man I was separated from at birth, the author of many great novels, including his latest, Adventures in Love, and the Manchester United football correspondent for The Guardian, Mr. Jamie Jackson. Jamie, how is everything with you, kid?
Very good, thank you. What a beautiful intro. Very kind words. How are you, sir? How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, all things considered. I think, admittedly, I would be beaming from ear to ear if Ruben had managed to deal Mikel Arteta a well-needed slap of reality at Old Trafford at the weekend. However, as you know, as well as I do, you don't always get what you want or what you deserve in life, and football is no different to that. But for me, it was one of those moments. It was a 1-0 defeat that felt like the most undeserving of outcomes for a largely one-sided meeting of Premier League royalty, with United pretty much dominating proceedings throughout. They controlled possession. They outpassed what has become somewhat of a perennial king of retaining the ball in a sumptuous manner and peppering David Raya's net with a plethora of opportunities. Now, ultimately, it was another set piece that allowed the Tony Pulis admirers to travel south with 3 points as Alta Bayindir was undone by the antics of Williams Saliba. Before we get into the game, Jamie, I felt this was important, especially for anyone listening, because I want to take of a non-Manchester United supporting journalist about the officiating and the need for the refereeing department to start putting their hands up to admit fault despite the apparent opinions of the ever-honest Dermot Gallagher. Now, we had 2 incidents that shaped the outcome. One being the build-up to the goal and Saliba's actions towards Mason Mount and Bayindir. And the second, when the Frenchman went through the back of Matheus Cunha in the penalty area and walked away scot-free. Let loose, Jimmy. Tell me all about it.
So, to take the second one first, 100%, it's a penalty. I mean, it's just simple as that. I mean, that is a penalty. I don't see. I mean, it looked a penalty. I was at the game, obviously. Looked a penalty with a naked eye from where I sit. And then when you see the replay, each time you see replay, it becomes more and more a penalty. So that was ridiculous. I've got to say, on the first one, it probably is a foul, but maybe a different keeper, or Bayindir with a different decision comes for that ball and basically gets people out, sort of forces his way through. So I'm not a fan, so maybe I can be more. Well, I can be more dispassionate. I blame him for that. Now I know he was impeded, but maybe if he moves, they don't get the opportunity to do that. I think he needs to be more forceful. It's not the first time. Obviously Fernandes afterwards said, they may have come to us, the Premier League, and said we're going to sort of penalise players if they're blocking off keepers, like our keeper. That's what happened in this. I accept that. And what you just said then, you did play better, but I hate to say this, or I don't want to say this and sort of annoy you, but you have to find a way to win or not lose. And it was interesting that Amorim, even afterwards, and I thought this was great for Amorim, he actually said, basically what you're saying and I'm saying, yeah, it looks a foul on Bayindir, but if that's not going to be penalised, then we have to be able to combat that. And also we should be doing it at the other end in Arsenal's goal. But I didn't think he deserved to lose, but I do, and I know it's silly to have hard and fast rules, but I do tend to think, unless it's ridiculous, and the penalty was ridiculous, so it should have been a draw, but the end result is the end result. But crumbs, you created a lot of chances, didn't you? You know, Cunha looks X Factor. You know, it looks like he could be really good, like a proper star. You know, so you not really had anyone like that really up top. I mean, you tell me, is it Van Persie's been someone since? I mean, Rooney maybe before he sort of, you know, got over the hill. I'm trying to think of someone who's lit up your attack consistently. It's early days. It's like a game. But he was really good, making something out of nothing, right? Which is, I think, always separates the very best from, you know, the sort of quite good, if you like, or you know, the best. You know, the ability to make something out of nothing. You know, that run from maybe halfway that took him all the way through first half. The shot wasn't great, but you know, he created that chance out of nothing. And then there was another moment, still in the first half, down the left, near to goal. He sort of wriggled, and I can't remember if he shot or he crossed. But again, how did he do that? Because he's brilliant. He looks brilliant. You know, and I'm hearing a little bit from basically players there, you know, at United, teammates training. He's pretty much doing the same sort of thing. So be able to translate it from training into a game against Arsenal, who are, you know, they'd like to think anyway they're going to be title contenders. I was impressed. I can't wait. I know you don't want to lose a game of football. I get that, and you basically said that. But, you know, that being said, Fulham, I'm looking up because United are away. I can watch that with my son who supports United on the TV because I'm doing City v Spurs on Saturday there at home. I'm looking forward to it. I think, listen, maybe I'm being too optimistic. I don't know. And the only reason why I temper that is because I've been here so many times with United since Ferguson left. But I'm thinking maybe, you know, you might have the start of the makings of a proper revival. It's a long season. It's one game. You had I think it was 20 shots to eight to Arsenal's, I think it was the count. It might be more. But on your side, you've got to take one of those chances. But, you know, it's the first game. And, yeah, going back to the penalty, I don't know if this is sure, but maybe it came through clear on TV because obviously out of the ground. Was it even reviewed on VAR? Because if you're reviewing that on VAR, first of all, I thought they had to review everything in the penalty area. So if it was reviewed, how could you not give that? I couldn't get my head around it.
You take the situation, and I mentioned Dermot Gallagher quite simply because of that ridiculous thing that happens on a weekly basis in Sky Sports where he seemingly reviews the controversial decisions at the weekend. And for the life of me now, it's after escaping me which ex-footballer was speaking to him. But he made the perfect point to him where he said, look, you're saying it's not a penalty, Dermot, but if that happens on the halfway line, then surely a free kick is given. And obviously he's going to argue it left, right and centre because that's his MO now. It's kind of, this is what people expect of me. But I believe they gave the briefest of looks at it and then just moved on because I think the general consensus was Cunha maybe initiated initial interaction between the two players. But regardless, he's come through the back of him.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Whether, you know, and you can argue that Cunha maybe initiated something or maybe it was just his natural movement of his body inside the area, but it's a defender's prerogative. You've mentioned Bayindir and how, while you can draw on what Saliba did, Bayindir needs to be stronger. That is fair. Two things can occur at the same time. Saliba was being a little bit naughty, but Bayindir should have been more commanding in the box. You can't imagine something like that happening with Peter Schmeichel back in the day. If you flip it around, and Cunha maybe possibly initiated that particular contact, but is it not the defender's prerogative to make sure he's not put in a position where the attacker is getting on that side of him and putting in that position anyway? But I don't want it to be a situation that we're now sitting back several days later, looking at his performance and, you know, playing the little violin, Jamie, and saying, oh, we were hard done by. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the season, no one is going to remember how many shots United had. No one is going to remember the level of performance. Ultimately, points is what matters, and Arsenal went down south with those points. It is frustrating in the manner that it occurred, and we do need to try to figure out ways to win football games regardless of what happens in the field. I do believe on any other day, David Raya doesn't perform those heroics and Cunha has at least one goal, because it has to be said that the difference provided by the introduction of both him and Bryan Mbeumo, even when you look at the brief cameo of 6'5" Benjamin Sesko, it offered a glimmer of what is to come from the big man in leading this ferocious looking new front line. Now, there is much time for this trio to prove themselves throughout what will be a long and successful career at the club. Although Amrim requires results immediately, this was a showing that offered so much hope that we have witnessed a frontline the United faithful actually deserves. It's fitting, obviously, that you touched on Cunha. I was wondering in my head how long it was going to take before we started speaking about him, because it was a little bit special. I get loads of questions sent through to me every single week. But there was a question that I'm going to pull up here. It came through from an individual called Chris Jessup, I believe is how it's pronounced. And that was sent to editor at theatre-of-red.com. And it was relating to the duo. And I'm going to put this to you, because you've obviously enjoyed 22 goals that Chris Wood has supplied in 37 Premier League appearances since last season. But Chris says, I'm following the club since the early 90s. I know it's early days and anything can occur over the coming weeks and months. But following a brace of hugely impressive debuts, where both players showing their capabilities required to excel at the theatre of dreams, that Matheus Cunha performance genuinely made me understand the comparison to Eric Cantona upon his arrival. I'm not trying to sound too giddy, but as good as Mbeumo was, and he was very good, there's just something about Cunha that screams confidence, arrogance, and arriving at what is his birthright. Am I mad? Do you think he's mad?
No, I don't think he's mad at all. I mean, I don't think he's saying he's as good as Cantona at the moment. What he's saying is, in this particular team, he could be the Cantona, the sort of X factor, the sort of, and from what we've seen, definitely. I took my son to the Fiorentina friendly, the last game before the Old Trafford, because my son Sonny is a United fan, and again Cunha was very good, and he looked basically. Sorry, the gentleman was called Chris, isn't it? Chris Jessup. He's right. I think he's a class above, or let's say a level above Mbeumo. Yeah, he's got something, something more. He's got something brilliant. Brilliant's a good word. He looks brilliant. He looks, because brilliant could also mean very shiny. Something's brilliant. It's really, and that's what I mean. And that's what he's like. He sort of lights up your team, or so far, in a very small sample size. I've got to keep on saying, because I sort of watch them for a living, but he does look instantly like he's just gone in that team and said, right, okay, almost like I'm going to take this is going to become my team. Not in a sort of move aside Fernandez way, but I've got the big enough shoulders, or I'm good enough to sort of walk that kind of talk. Arsenal are always getting lauded for having the best defence in the Premier League. Well, he sort of like tore it apart a little bit. All I'm saying is, in the second half, both of them did fade a little bit. I'm not saying they didn't do anything in the second half. In fact, Mbeumo was header right at the end that Raya saved to the left?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Good header that. But yeah, no, I mean, football's about dreaming. If you're a fan, fair play to Chris. He's looking at this, and I think he's mixing, a bit of sort of fan dreaming, which is a lovely thing, but also with a fair analysis, a sort of a realistic analysis. He's basically saying, I don't want to be giddy, but wait a minute, this guy looks like it could be the real deal. That's kind of what I was saying. He looks, and that's why it's exciting. And I have to say, the more I think about it, the fact that Amorim has looked at that team, at his team, or the squad that he inherited, and thought, you know what? I mean, I know you needed to do this anyway, but I'm just going to concentrate on the attack. Because what he could have done, he could have said, right, I'll have a central centre forward, which is obviously Sesko. I'll take Cunha, and I'll go for central midfield. But I've been told quite consistently, like, it was the attack. He just wants to revamp that attack and goals, basically. And that's great. That's the United way, isn't it? Yeah, attack, fantasy, and in Cunha, certainly you've got a star. And let's see what Sesko can do. Once he starts, I believe he's going to start on Sunday at Fulham. It's exciting. He's got in there and thought, because maybe from his, in terms of job security and try to like shore up the team and all the rest of it, he might have thought, I need to get a number 6 as a priority, one of these free signings, but he's not done that. I think you still are in for a number 6 and pull it off. You've only lost 1-0 at home to Arsenal, and as we've discussed, you should have beaten them, really. You know what I mean? You should have done that against Arsenal, yeah? Who were like, I don't know, 5 years ahead of you in development. Arteta's gone 5 years. Basically, I mean, I know he won the FA Cup, but it wasn't really his team. So he's not, he's gone 5 years without a trophy. And Amorim. So I just feel, and again, I am always glass half full. Maybe I'm being glass completely full on this one. I just feel that maybe there's something stirring here. It's the 21st of August, sort of 10 days is it left of the transfer window. You get a number 6 in, even better. I do feel some of his selections in terms of the starting 11, I don't know if we want to get into that, were a little bit, I'm going to say questionable because it is right, but I was surprised at some of them, as someone who's paid to observe them. You observe them obviously for a living as well, Shaun. I don't know what you think, but I don't know what's happened with Ugarte. People say, Ugarte's not that good, but I think he's a good stopper. I think he's got more energy and legs than Casemiro. Surprised about that one. Diallo not starting, I'm surprised. But even given all this, you nearly beat him. As we sort of say, your keeper got fouled. He did get fouled, I think. As we're also saying, maybe you should have stopped that foul ever being possible by being more, I think the word you said was more forceful or more, I can't remember. But, so there's a heck of a lot of positives. And if you're a fan, even more, I've got to be sort of balanced. I'm not saying you're not balanced, but, I have to look at it quite coldly. And, I don't have any sort of vested interest, or I'm not, I don't have anything in my blood about United. So I get that. But what can't happen, I mean, listen, maybe it can happen and in the end it'll be all right. But you don't want to go to Fulham now. Look, you can still lose at Fulham, but you need to play like that, really, again. You need consistency of performance. And, Guardiola gets one thing right amongst many when he says, look, the result sometimes doesn't go your way. But if you play all the time, the right way, that's good. And I think you need to go there. And I think you will to Fulham and do the same, Who knows with Cunha? He could end up with 20, 25 goals in all competition. I don't necessarily mean in the Premier League. And, being the sort of whatever it is, the PFA or Premier League team of the year, might even be a contender for, or he might bomb. But so far, what I've seen, because remember, I didn't go on the tour this summer because I did the Club World Cup. I've seen him play twice. He's looked ace each time. I'm starting to think, this is good. He could end up being a bargain.
Yeah, well, I think so much of it comes down to a realization as to what we're going looking at and being pragmatic about things. Mbeumo hit 20 Premier League goals last season. Cunha got, was it in around 15, 16?
Yes.
Sesko has obviously never played in England before. You wouldn't think that they're going to immediately convert what they've done at their other clubs into this Manchester United attack. However, if they were to come in and even if they added 10 each, that's 10 more in the league than they had last year. And that can only benefit the side. Regarding what you were saying about the selections, on last week's podcast, I actually went into it in a little bit of detail because I was asked the question about how I thought we were going to line up. And the only two that I actually got wrong was Sesko and Onana, because what I had been hearing from the ground was that Onana was coming along very well, that he was largely fit and that he was really pushing towards starting. I thought Sesko was going to come in from the start just to help to give that extra bit of a boost on the first game of the season because the crowd would have gone nuts if they'd seen him lining out. I do understand why Sesko didn't play, but I had delivered quite a bit of focus on Dalot and Ahmad because I actually convinced myself in the run-up to the game that Diogo Dalot was going to start, just based on the fact that he was a more physical presence than Ahmad was, and that he'd be looking at keeping the likes of Gabriel Martinelli that little bit quieter on the wing back, adding that physicality and the stamina that he has going up and down. I do kind of agree what you're saying with Ugarte. The problem that I think that he's facing, he was brought in to be this destroyer, not to be a ball player. And the problem is, I think he can overcomplicate simple passes from time to time. His brain farts, if you will, end up in terrible, terrible moments at the worst possible time. And if he was to go in and make 10 interceptions, 8 tackles, make 6 or 7 ball recoveries, every single one of them are forgotten for one poor pass that either led to a goal or led to us nearly conceding a goal. And that's what really resonates across social media. I do think there's a player there. I'm just not sure if he's going to get the opportunity to be able to show it because there's such pressure on him.
So sorry to interrupt, but can I ask you a question then? I hear what you're saying, very fair, but so would you rather, if it's a toss-up between him and Casemiro, you think Casemiro is the right person to start, the right player to start at the moment?
I think you'd probably at this moment be a little bit more comfortable playing Ugarte against a Fulham because you would be expecting to have more of the football before a ball is kicked. I think the general consensus, dodgy decisions aside, is that many people wouldn't have anticipated a United side featuring 9 of the starting 11 who finished 15th last season to completely dominate an Arsenal team with title aspirations. I spoke in the run-up to this regarding Casemiro. I sort of boiled it into a trio with Casemiro, Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire because the question was put to me about how important I felt that these veterans, the more senior members of the squad, were going to be coming into the season. And I actually spoke about how obviously critically important they are in a dressing room, as well as the training field, and also being a vessel for the manager on the pitch if the manager wants to get his message across. These are the real wily veterans that have been there and done it both at club and country, and they're able to get that message across to the younger players on the field. I felt and I said last week that Casemiro was going to start beside Bruno because he would offer that experience in the heart of midfield when I figured we were going to be completely overrun. I don't think Ugarte can give us that at this moment in time. And looking back through all of the articles that I've published throughout the last 12 months, I'm among a very, very small cohort of people that's been defending him because I'm really sort of pushing the side that he's more of a destroyer. Win the ball, pass it to a more creative outlet in the midfield. And that's what he was brought in for. It's just when we see these little moments during the games where he's having that brain fart and people are looking at it and thinking this fella is a complete and utter liability, what they do is they focus on everything except what he was brought in to do. And they start trying to look at it as if, well, he's supposed to be a deep lying playmaker. He's supposed to be able to pass the football and have chance creation. Bearing that in mind and knowing what I know about Manchester United and how the fan base can turn, especially on social media, so quickly, he's getting so much abuse, Jamie, on a daily basis that when you're going out playing against the likes of Arsenal, Casemiro has been there and done it. And even though he is on that other side of the other stage of his career, I think we saw a little bit toward the end of the season and we saw quite a bit during pre-season that shows he really still has a little bit of something there. That's why I thought he was going to start over Ugarte. I had great aspirations for Ugarte to come in because I remember one of the articles that I wrote in the lead up coming to him referenced publications in France and how he was being held as the glue that held this Paris Saint-Germain team together. Then obviously Luis Enrique comes in, changes the dynamic of how the football team plays, and he no longer needs a player of that particular capacity. So immediately in moving to Manchester United, he's given the tagline as a player who's not good enough to play in Paris, or he's a player who's not wanted in Paris. When realistically speaking, the manager just doesn't require him for the type of philosophy that he plays with, because he wants like a Vitinha sitting there taking the ball off the defence and bringing it forward. So I think Ugarte is a very, very unfortunate situation, and I think he's going to fall foul, very similar to Rasmus Højlund, because Højlund has come into a situation where there was so much expectation placed on his shoulders, and when it doesn't work immediately, then all of a sudden he's declared not good enough, and what's the next shiny thing that's going to be brought in? I think that's really where the problem is, Jamie. It's not necessarily that I would value Casemiro above the profile of a player like Ugarte. I think in their particular form right now, if you asked 100 members of the fan base, 100 people would say they would start Casemiro instead of Ugarte.
Yeah, I mean, that in itself shows why that area of the team needs to be strengthened. I mean, I think if you've got Bruno Fernandes as the other central midfielder, who's obviously very creative, then Ugarte, his ability to sort of break stuff up and play the simple pass, and okay, he makes mistakes, but surely Amorim's job is to coach him. Part of his job anyway is to coach these players and make him better. Listen, It's not like I'm a massive, let's get Ugarte in the team and United will be. I just can't. Especially when that was the same midfield pair that basically messed up against Spurs in the Europa League final. Fernandes and Casemiro. I'm just baffled by it. I mean, he's been for sale basically for a year and a half, Casemiro. It's nothing against Casemiro personally. I'm just very puzzled by that. But as you said, that midfield did well against Arsenal. The two we're talking about. I'm just a little bit surprised that he still feels Casemiro's a better option because you lost that game. You lost the Europa League final as well. In the end, I know we're discussing it's bad luck. Not bad luck, but it was a foul on Bayern Deer. I'd just be interested to see what happens at Fulham. Kind of as I just sort of said, what we're sort of talking about here is how he needs to strengthen midfield, and it relates back to what I said earlier. He's concentrating on the attack, and fair play to him because I think the defense is basically you could have an argument about you'd like an upgrade on Dalot, for example, or whatever it might be. I get all that, but it's not like in a critical. The defense is actually quite solid. Would you? I don't know if you'd agree. You've got like some good centre backs there, etc. The Diallo thing is interesting for me because you're right, Diallo is more of a physical presence. So now I'm going to slightly contradict myself. Given that Diallo seems to have been a good 10 on the right-hand side last season, maybe your best player, it's interesting that he doesn't think he can do a first-choice job. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bought 2 new 10s, would he? And by the way, Fernandes can play there. And he might actually prefer to play as a number 10 rather than central midfield. So I am kind of contradicting myself. But having seen how they've just played, especially Cunha, but Mbeumo as well, I think they are upgrades on those 2 players in those positions. I just feel, I don't know, is Diallo going to end up being a bit of a Ugarte then to sort of use your coinage and Højlund in that? I don't know. He's going to come, it has to be if I ask myself a slightly different question, where do I think Diallo's best positions? I don't think he's a natural right wing back. I think he can do it and he will do it because he's got that sort of attitude. But I think you sort of lose a little bit of a... I think the profile of him compared to, say, Patrick Dorgu, who seems to be the first choice on the other side, left wing back, as a left wing back. He's more of a physical, a bit like what you said about Dalot. He's like a physical sort of like defender first, who obviously, can get up and down. And I don't know, Diallo seems a little bit lightweight, but I might have been proved wrong because he's been proving wrong all these sort of... I don't mean lightweight as in he's not a good player, but I mean in terms of physicality, in terms of the defensive side, kind of what you just said about Dalot. But, all this stuff here we're talking about is why we love football, because everyone's entitled to their opinion. Just because I've got one doesn't mean to say I'm right.
It's perfectly accurate what you're saying. Like, with all of the work that I've been doing for, God, how long is it now? Maybe 3 years that I've been doing with Breaking the Lines. I spent 2 months working with Sporting when Amrin was there. The general consensus was that he was replacing Pep Guardiola, but I looked so much into the tactical side of what it is that he does and how he deploys. A lot of people are coming around to it in England now because they can see that there's a framework, but so much of what he does is he has his 3 centre backs. There's always one of them that pushes further up, joins in with the more defensively minded of the midfield duo. Right. What he does is he goes very much in this line of a Ralph Rangnick, where it's blocks. When you've got the 2 full backs, more often than not, they're used as decoys. But then that one opportunity where they break forward, that's where you see Dorgu hitting the post from a completely ridiculous shot that he took from about 35 yards out. And Ahmad, I believe, look, I'm not saying I'm perfectly correct in this, but Ahmad is a perfectly versatile player. And the biggest thing that he offers on that right-hand side is the fact that he's a predominantly left-footed player. Because so much of what Amram likes is having the wrong-footed player on either side of his fullbacks. Okay. Because you have him providing the decoy runs down the right, but you also have him getting space. And then you have him being able to cut in, kind of like in that Salah-esque inside forward, where he'll cut in and hit it on the inside of his stronger left foot from the right-hand side, and it gets the curlers. So much of the structure of this philosophy of what Amram wants to achieve, it ends up in these real congested spaces. His aim is to get the ball into the final third, into a really, really congested central area that you might see 5-6 of his attacking players within close proximity of one another. The 2 fullbacks offer those decoy runs just to open space from defenders following them. But the idea is that you get 5 or 6 of these attacking players centrally. And this is what we saw at Sporting with Victor Gyökeres, and it was why he was so strong in that system, because so many of the creative players were moving around him, and that he just has to get on with maybe a channel-busting run, or he's the last person to touch the football and put it in the back of the net. Also, as well as we stated, acting as a target man, and this is why Benjamin Sesko is going to be very good. I just feel that Ahmad, if he is in that situation where he's in a congested area, you lose so much of his attacking threat. He does so much better when he has the ball at his feet and he's able to run at the defence. And the best opportunity that he's going to have in that situation is if he's in a wide perspective, cutting inward. And that's what I feel is going to happen there. Now, I don't think Ahmad is going to fall into the Hoyland sort of... it's terrible that you class it as the Hoyland sort of spectrum, because he's been brought aside and he's been treated as an individual who's going to be an outcast. I do think he can excel as a right wing back in this system. And as you've said, he has the capacity, if and needs be, to go more inward and play as that 10. And that's not even bringing into the conversation Joshua Zirkzee, because Zirkzee gives a fantastic option as a 10 as well. But as much positivity as we are discussing here, there is something that really needs to stand out, because it was the fulcrum of the defeat, and it's around the goalkeeping dilemma that exists. And it continues to fuel this ongoing discussion about the necessity for further summer activity. We've been engaged with United's interest, as we spoke off recording, in Sen Lamens since early July. And we confirmed that Ruben had given a green light for the player's arrival maybe 6-7 weeks ago at this stage. Now, naturally, the potential availability of Gianluigi Donnarumma, it's going to spike any club's interest, as you're now seeing with Chelsea and Manchester City as well, with this widely respected option at 26 years of age, presenting the type of deal that any sort of top club with European ambitions needs to consider. United have 3 first-team goalkeepers at the club. We know that officials are not keen on adding a 4th. So it's always about a departure, be it a loan or a sale, would need to be agreed for any existing players. However, with in around 2 weeks, as you said, about 10 days remaining, we're still none the wiser about developments. I revealed on Tuesday, interest in Lamens remains strong. And there is a sense, the biggest thing that I'm getting back is that there's a sense of worry in ignoring a potential move for a player that's now valued less than £20 million this summer, only to return in 2 or 3 years for a fee that has trebled. Yeah. But there is much indecision. and all existing options, from what I believe, would prefer to remain in Manchester. That includes Andre Onana. Given we have a man of your skill set here today on the Theatre of Red, what can you share about the goalkeeping scenario at Old Trafford, sir?
Yeah, so on Lamans, as I understand it, they've never actually made a formal move or bid. But what you're saying is completely correct. Your info's 100%. They've been looking at him for, a few weeks. And also what you just said then about the departures. What I'm told is Onana, they don't think will go anywhere. In fact, he himself, Onana, I'm told, doesn't expect to go anywhere. And I'm also told that United have been saying to clubs who've inquired about Onana, we don't think we're going to let him go. Yes. And I think Onana, as I understand it, is aware of that the clubs have been sort of saying, United have been saying to any inquiries. Listen, when I say inquiries, I don't mean like a formal bid, but you know what it's like. Oh, we might be interested in Andre Onana. No, not at the moment. Listen, never say never in football. And I think if they could get the right deal for Onana or Bayandia, they would probably consider pulling the trigger if they had, a Donnarumma or possibly a Lamans who would, but I don't think like Lamans, he's 22 years old. You always got to say this, but he's playing in the Belgian league. It's not the Premier League. It's not La Liga. It's not Serie A. Blah blah blah. It's a big step. Especially United. The United, of all the stuff about of all the sort of scrutiny that's on United, you've got the manager, right? You've got the centre forward, and then I'd suggest you've got the goalkeeper in terms of the most. Do you know what I mean? You might even say the goalkeeper's a more difficult position than the centre forward. You know what I'm saying, don't you? Because it's your Manchester United. It's not Nottingham Forest, my team, or even City or Liverpool. It's Manchester United. So what I'm saying is
it's the scrutiny.
Yeah. And so Lamins, I think, is not that attractive only because there isn't an established number one who he can challenge it. Because by definition, okay, maybe Bayendia could leave and then he comes in and challenges Onana. So I at the moment, I think Onana, he's fully fit. He's trained another week, as we know. We're just sort of talking about the Arsenal situation. What Amarin said afterwards. I'd be staggered if he doesn't start on Sunday, and I think he will be, as I understand it. And then, you're looking at like the last week of the window. So I think Amarin could never say this, but I don't think he particularly fancies Onana. What was the game or the sort of, was it in between? Was it after the first Lyon game last season? He then dropped him for the Newcastle game because he threw in a couple. You remember the sort of Europa League?
Yeah, and it was almost like to take him out of the spotlight after a bad performance.
And then he reinstated him. Onana had that spat with Nemanja Matic. And guess what? Onana sort of did what Matic said, which was so. He's got a track record of mistakes. So has Bayendia. It is a problem. It's an issue. I still think Onana, and I think Amarin probably thinks this is the better keeper than Bayendia of the two options. So it needs to be solved. You never know in football. It could well be solved by the 1st of September, 9-10 days away. But I wouldn't be betting any serious money on it just because of everything I've just told you, which is the information I'm being told by people at the club, at the training ground, etc., etc. But I do think it's a bit of a mistake, Shaun, if you ask me that question. I think he should have prioritised this. Going back to the 2-10s, the free players, the free attackers. I think if you can only get 3 major signings, and I'm not saying there won't be a major number 6 in, but as we stand, if you're at the 21st of August, you've had one game, I think it's a mistake not to have addressed this goalkeeper situation because it's cost you points, doesn't it, in games? It just has. Onana, Champions League under Ten Hag, last season I just meant, it just does. He's got a track record of doing it. He's a really nice guy. I've interviewed him once on tour. All the rest of it's nothing against him personally. I've always got to say that. These are really sort of successful young men who've done unbelievably well to get where they are. Fair play to them. They work very hard. Nothing personal, but the cold hard light of facts of track record at your club in your team, he's not done good enough really. Maybe this will be the season, but you can't. If you want to get anywhere consistently, you've got to be ruthless. Really, you can't go on with maybes. How soon is now, jam tomorrow. You have to pull the trigger sometimes. Yeah, and I think he's had 2 seasons, 3 seasons, certainly 2. Onana. So I think it's a mistake. Hopefully he'll do really, really well on Sunday and start to show that he can be consistent. I mean, he was brilliant for Inter when they got to the final, of the Champions League. I did that game. He was brilliant in that. He looked amazing. So maybe it's gonna happen. I really hope it does. I'm a sort of a fan of anyone doing well in life, but Yeah, I do think it's a bit of a mistake in the cold hard light day, just because, Sunday, if it wasn't, maybe Donnarumma would have done the same, but if it was a sort of, let's say, the elite number one, maybe you don't lose that game. These are the things. These are what, this is what Amarin's employed to do, what Jason Wilcox, director of football, is employed to do, to find out where the margins are, where you can improve. So yeah, I mean, hopefully he goes to Fulham if he does start Onana and as a blinder. But the problem is not with that blinder. The problem is can he turn it on every game? You have to be able to. Do you remember De Gea when he started off at United? He had issues, but it was in his first season. He dropped him for, what was the gentleman's name?
Lindegaard, yes.
Yes. But then he reinstated De Gea towards the end of that season. Last time it was his first season, 2011. You won the league that year. So second, but last time he did it. And then he never really looked back to De Gea until towards the end of his time at United. So, maybe that will happen with Onana. But I just think if you're Amarin, it's difficult to deal in. There's no such thing as a sure thing in sport or in life. But, I would just suggest that it's a bit of an issue, the goalkeeping situation.
I would agree thoroughly. And that's why I've been spending so much time speaking with the sources that I have close to the ground about this Lamens thing, because as a supporter first, this is something that concerns me. And the biggest thing that concerns me about Lamens is, yes, he's playing in Belgium. And yes, from his perspective, you can only stop the shots from the individuals that are in front of you. I do think that a goalkeeper, though, can be held in a slightly different light than a defender, a midfielder, or attacker in a different league. Because the goalkeeping position on any given day, I think I wrote this at some stage, on any given Sunday, on any field, in any country on this planet, you can have the most average footballer hit the most perfect of shot. And it is a goalkeeper's prerogative to keep it out of the back of the net. And from what we have seen for such a young guy in Belgium, his command of the area and the amount of saves that he is making is just, it seems like it would be a mistake to ignore it, especially at this price. In the same vein, I do stand by what you're saying with Andre Onana. I too covered the Champions League final that he was playing. And I remember sitting there and I was just thinking that this is an absolutely superb goalkeeper. He's a modern day goalkeeper in the way he passes the football, the arrogance that he has as this sweeper keeper. Just, it really does emphasize the pressure and the scrutiny that comes in a Manchester United number one. It's unlike anything else.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned De Gea, because I do remember actually Jamie Redknapp on Sky Sports. I think it was the first couple of weeks that De Gea had come to the football club. Redknapp came straight on and said, this is not a Manchester United goalkeeper. He's not good enough. What have they done? What has Sir Alex done? And it just goes to show how things can change. But sticking in the transfer scene, we might as well when we're here. We've seen growing developments regarding Alejandro Garnacho and his reported desires to play for Chelsea and Chelsea alone in what would be about the 2,500 acquisition under Todd Bowley. United are sticking to their guns by all accounts, Jamie, for a £50 million fee. And that's highlighting past transfers out of London as the benchmark for negotiations. From what I'm told and from what I'm reading, it appears to be a matter of when and not if that deal gets completed. United will not wilt in their demands, regardless of the type of games being played at Stamford Bridge or by the player. But the glaring factor that stands out in all of this to me is the petulance that we have seen along the way, with that picture in a Rashford Aston Villa shirt adding to his reported desire to sit out his contract if he doesn't get a move. But it's not just with Garnacho. I think this is players in general, because we've seen so many scenarios throughout the years. And like so many stories, we generally only get one side. That's the problem. But with this, you see Alexander Isak and Yohan Wissa all highlighting such sour endings to their journey. And it really does highlight this kind of mercenary trait of feeling for me, even though, as I said, we're only getting really one side of the story. I'm not saying that these players are entirely at fault and that the clubs are free from blame, because I can guarantee you that they're not, Jamie. But when you refuse to train, are you not letting your teammates down, and most importantly, disregarding the loyal supporters who have cheered you on to where you are today in striving to earn your desired move, be it to Chelsea, Newcastle or Liverpool?
Yeah, I mean, what I can't quite get past, it's kind of basically what you're saying, is you're a paid employee. How can you not do what you're getting paid for? I mean, I know they might fine them 2 weeks, but it just, Eze seems to have just played on and trade on, even though, he knew Spurs and then Arsenal as it's look, so I agree with you. The Garnacho thing's been a bit of a puzzle for me, because, he wants a transfer request. Sorry, he's put in a transfer request according to the club, although that group of players, within it, there's some dispute about actually whether transfer requests have been put in. But I mean, Garnacho, I didn't mind what he said after the Europa League final. He basically said, "Oh, I only played 20 minutes. Basically, I should have played more." I get why people didn't like it because who do you think you are? But do you know what? Do you not want a player thinking, I could have made a difference? But there's obviously reasons why Amorim hasn't put him in. He obviously dropped him initially with Rashford, didn't he? Ahead of that derby, the City, the City game. So there's obviously lots of stuff there. And you're quite right, very balanced, Shaun, to sort of say we're only getting one side of the story. That's kind of why I'm maybe sort of trying to indicate, maybe there, maybe it's a bit of a puzzle because we just don't know exactly what's happened. But yeah, you're right. And listen, if I turn up tomorrow at the Guardian and say, you know what, I don't fancy working today, but I'd be sacked, and so I should. You know what I mean? Obviously, there'd be a procedure, but I get that football is not working for the Guardian or whatever. It is it's its own industry, and players have value, and you're under contract. But I thought Oliver Glasner had it right. I think he was talking about Eze, but I think he was maybe sort of broad, basically hinting at what you're saying, Isaac and Wizard, which is if you're a contracted employee as a player, the very least. And actually, you shouldn't be getting congratulated for it. The very least you should do is train properly and play properly. That's what you're getting paid for, all this money. I mean, I'm guessing Eze at Palace is on thick end of 100, maybe 80. It's not a massive payer. But it's a heck of a lot of money. Why would he not? Why should he not train properly? And he has done, and play properly. So you go to Isaac. The other thing that makes me laugh is, this whole gentleman's agreement thing, whereby he sort of reckons, Isaac seems to reckon that he was told, if a big club comes in, you can leave. And then but what I'm getting to say is people say, it's the agent who's probably done him wrong. Sorry, he's the big boy, Isaac. He's the player. He's employing that agent. It's on him. Whatever the ins and outs of it, it does, just turn up. If Isaac basically had done what Eze's said, or sort of done, which is just basically, I'm going to train all the time, but I want to leave. I don't think anyone could have any issue with that. It's the fact you're refusing to train. You're going to go and train at your former club, whatever. It just seems really. And you were right then about the fans. You're so right. The fans who've loved you. I think he scored when they won the Carabao Cup, wasn't it? They won, yeah.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
He scored in the final, didn't he? I think along with the big tall defender, his name I can remember, Dan Burn. So he's a hero. He's a hero, and he'll look back and regret this, even if he gets his move to Liverpool, if it's this summer or, whenever, January. He'll look back and think, why did I do that? Because I've soured. He'd done it all. He'd walked the talk. He'd scored for loads of goals from him. He'd scored a goal in their first domestic trophy for 70 years. And he basically messed all that up. And it's a shame. It's a shame for him. So I agree with you. And Garnacho, I feel a little bit sorry, really, that this has happened. Because even though I'm a non-fan, I liked him as a player. I know, people say, was he that good? But I thought he sort of could light up a team. I'm not saying he's good as Cunha, but he had a little something. Certainly, it's a squad player anyway, coming on, maybe breaking defences. So I think he's a good player. So something that, the breakdown relationship there, if that's what's happened, it seems to have done with Amorim. It seems a bit of a shame. I wonder whether Amorim could have done more to keep him on side. I'm not saying he could, but as you're saying, and I've got to say, who knows exactly what's happened there? Something's happened. So, yeah, I mean, and it's an interesting one. If we wake up tomorrow or after we finish this conversation, suddenly Garnacho's gone to, so they want to pay about 30, I think, Chelsea. It's obviously taking the mick, and, United value at 50, 55, 60. Imagine, say he goes for 40, 45, suddenly Donnarumma or a keeper is on, right? So let's wait and see. It's going to concentrate. This last sort of 8, 9, 10 days, like you probably, I've covered so many transfer windows in my time in this job. Sometimes it's relatively quiet. Sometimes the last sort of week and a half is hilarious because it's just like non-stop. And I think we're in one of those really like helter-skelter, what the heck's going on here, roller coaster. Good fun to be involved in.
I think we're gearing up for a lot of departures and maybe one surprising incoming that's really, really going to G the audience. So, you've mentioned a lot of stuff about the players. I think one thing that it all comes back to, and I always reference this, they surround themselves with individuals that they shouldn't be. I think it's one of the biggest failings in young footballers is they surround themselves with individuals that tell them what they want to hear all the time. And if you don't have a strong arm on your shoulder telling you when you've done wrong, ultimately you make poor decisions. And we've seen it. It's not just Garnacho. We've seen it so many times through the years with talented young players coming to Manchester United. I think when you look at Isak, a story on both sides of that, and I'm just referencing him for example, you see this free Isak situation that's going on now. If and when he gets his move to Liverpool, what happens when Real Madrid come knocking in 2 years? Is he going to throw his rattle out at the pram with Liverpool because there was a gentleman's agreement about being able to go over and play in Spain if and when they came calling? And I think it tells an awful lot about a player. Thankfully, it would appear as though we're edging ever closer to alleviating another little bit of toxicity at the club, albeit Jadon Sancho appears absolutely hell-bent on never leaving. And the feel-good factor is growing alongside a very fancy-looking Carrington, and we can all say that. There is a sense of possibility within the squad. And it's also felt within the stands because that was evident at Old Trafford at the weekend and also kind of epitomised by the supporter response to the 1958's decision to postpone their scheduled protest. As we have somewhat discussed throughout the entire podcast, all of this is going to count for nothing if Amram's men don't deliver the same level of performance against Fulham and actually collect points to bring back for the visit of Burnley the following weekend. So, given what you saw and what we've discussed, and the additional week that Ruben has shared and will share on the training field with his players, how do you feel ahead of the trip to London in a few days?
Well, I feel optimistic, but I'm just going to temper it with there's been sort of false dawns or moments in previous regimes where I thought, this looks good. So I've got to throw that in there. It doesn't just because that's happened before, by the way, it doesn't mean to say it's going to happen on Sunday. Why should it? But I'm just, because I've been around the block so many times. But I do, I'm really, really fascinated. As I say, I can sit down with my son who, Manchester United mad, he's just turned 14. Sit there and he will be sort of like very optimistic. And I am optimistic. I just, in Cunha, I know I shouldn't go on too much about Cunha, but why not? I feel like you've got a player there who, let's say you go down 1-0 down at Craven Cottage early on. I think he's got a bit like Cantona. He's got, a bit like Rooney, right? A bit of a talisman side to him. Come on then, lads, but I'm going to pull us through this. And in doing that, if he can do that, and I know it is an if, you've got a player like that who does it a lot of times, it starts to make other players believe in themselves as well, because this guy's doing it, why can't I do it? That's what inspiration is, right, Shaun? Yeah, it's leadership, really, inspiration, isn't it? It's like, right, I'm going to show you what you can do by doing it myself. Okay, so I am optimistic. I really hope you don't lose 4-0 after I've said all this. We'll look even more stupid than usual, right? But I don't think you will. But I am optimistic. I think, as I say, fair play to Amran. He's decided the attack needs sorting, and he looks like he's got. Sesko's not started a game for you yet. Yeah, let's see what he's got about him. You're right. I thought he did far better than Gyökeres did. Gyökeres had 60 minutes, right? And I think Sesko had 20 minutes. Did he? I can't remember exactly when he came on. But he did. He seemed to do far more. He did do far more than Gyökeres. So that is another point. How's he going to go? And remember, in a month's time, they'll be a lot slicker. This team will be a lot slicker. This front line will be a lot slicker. You may well have a number 6. The guy at Sporting, the captain, is it Himoland? I don't know how to say his name. I think he might be interested in him. United might be interested in him. So there is cause for optimism. It's not like your first game of the season you've lost to, I don't know, Wolves, 2-1, and oh my God, that was a very unfortunate defeat to a team who's come second last three years and fancy themselves as title contenders. You don't want to lose a game, of course you don't. But spoke to Harry Maguire was spoken to yesterday. I don't know if you've seen the quotes, and he was sort of basically saying this. He's saying, look, we don't want to lose a game, but there's a lot of good things. And often players say that because they have to, but he was correct on this occasion. He was correct. So, glass half full, or let's say glass completely full. I think you may go there and beat them 3-0, Shaun.
I think you're along the same lines, because had we two have come out of the game against Arsenal and we were the ones that nicked a 1-0 win and it was another dredgy performance where there was just no cohesion and you didn't really see where the team was going, I'd probably feel worse. I'd be a little bit concerned going to Craven Cottage thinking we're going to come up against a low block. We're not going to be able to break this down. When in reality, there's a little bit more positivity because of what we saw. And I will keep all the cards as close to my chest as I possibly can, because we've seen it time and time again throughout the last, 15 years. But there is a pretty good feeling coming out of here, Jamie, and I'm looking forward to the game. That's the biggest thing. And my man, as always, it is my great pleasure to chat with you. Funnily enough, there was a listener called Tom Thorpe who sent a message through when word got out about your cameo here today, shared his love for you and for me, and suggested that we should become a duo forevermore. But
Imagine a love child, Shaun.
Oh my God, I'm not sure that the world could handle that. But I certainly cherish the time spent, sir, as I always do. Any news with you over the coming weeks or months outside of the work being done with The Guardian?
Well, just, the novel you mentioned there, Adventures in Love. I'm going to be at Liverpool Book Festival the 7th of September. I might be doing that's 12 to 6. I'm actually doing a little DJ spot as well as my book, sort of being on show there with my publishing over. So those sort of things, really. Part of a panel for the book at a bookstore a few days later. And then, listen, in terms of The Guardian, I can't wait. I think the Champions League draws next week, right? I can't wait to see. I know this is not a City podcast, but just because United out in Europe, I'm excited to see who City have got, because obviously that'll be me lucky enough to follow them all over Europe for the sort of 400 games group stage now in the Champions League. But I like this time of the year because obviously the footy side, and I quite like it when it becomes autumn. It starts to sort of like, the air gets a bit colder, and you start to see how the cards are going to fall in the league. So I'm really interested because I'm sure, unless I am the curse, because basically since I started doing this job, you did win the title in my first full season under Ferguson, but since then, 0. So I'm wondering whether I need to be sacked, right? And then you will rise again.
So you're telling me it's your fault.
Maybe it is. But no, what I'm trying to say is I like to think that as long as I'm in this job, at some point United are going to come good. Because apart from I want to see my son sort of enjoy basically what you will have done when they were, under Ferguson. It was just a ridiculously great side, because he loves them so much. I want him to be happy, sort of thing.
My eldest, he turns 20 in February, so I'd really like him to be able to enjoy some of that as well. I'm sure most are aware who are listening, but what's the best way that they can get in touch with you if anyone fancies a chat or keeping up to speed with your content, sir?
Very kind of you to ask. So basically, X at Jamie Jackson, all one word _3 times, or Instagram, the same, at Jamie Jackson _3 times.
Brilliant stuff. As always, thank you, and thank everybody for giving me a little bit of your time today. It is my great pleasure to see the Theatre of Red audience growing weekly. And if you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe wherever you are listening today. Visit the official website for some great daily content and join the community across every social at theatre_of_red. You are all very welcome along, and I will be back to you next week to dissect Grimsby and Burnley and to tend to all of your questions. So until then, stay safe, enjoy the Fulham trip on Sunday, and I will catch you all very, very soon. Georgie.